Hey, JallyGrean 1990 here to do part 2 of my part 3 Record of Ragnorak review. A friend had asked me to review Record of Ragnorak. So part 2 is me going to be looking at the fights. So Record of Ragnorak is essentially a fight between the gods and human champions, as well as other gods who get involved to help humans. So season 2 of the anime, I'm not sure, I think will be kicking off probably by August, starting with the 4th fight. I'm going off of the manga, so spoilers if you've not read the manga. So the 4th fight, which is one of my favorite fights, it's versus Hercules versus Jack the Ripper. I like this, as to this day people still don't know who Jack the Ripper is. There's many speculations that he was a young man, he was, a woman. I mean, a lot of people assume kind of he was essentially, his mom was a hooker, but because going so far back, we don't know exactly every little detail. They have some rough inkling, but that's about it. And so to me, anything about this character is interesting because it's the author's perspective. So with that too is the author puts in the perspective that he thinks Jack the Ripper can see emotions, and so the reason he was killing hookers or people was because to get certain emotions, happiness, euphoria, and that's why he killed him a certain way. He wasn't happy. I like that he's paired against Hercules, who the story of Hercules has changed, where essentially he's a young boy who wanted to become a hero, and he drinks ambrosia and stops essentially Ares bringing judgment on Thebes, and then Ares recognizes Hercules, and Hercules goes through trials and eventually becomes recognized as a son of Zeus. And they even said, he takes the name Hercules in honor of Hera. Hera hated anyone who essentially was not true son of her, Zeus, and hers. She hated all of Zeus's, according to mythology, misgivings and affairs. And so to me, this little tweak kind of gives the more Hercules in a positive light and Hera in a positive light, and yet Ares, who are typically seen as a guy who is the god of war, who is often beaten and always the best. And so to me, I like that we kind of had these gods held to a little higher standard, respectable standard. And so the battle with Hercules versus Jack the Ripper for me was interesting because you have a scene that is created, and it's the first time we really see a scene that is specifically designed for that is 18th century Great Britain, pretty much, with the city-like and kind of a maze back and forth. And throughout this, you have Hercules, who has his natural strength, and he has his weapon, and essentially his club, and then head of the lion, and he has 12 different powers that he can use for his 12 different labors, and each one takes a toll of his life force, and he has a tattoo that continues to grow. I like that it wasn't just a basic weapon. Whereas with Jack the Ripper, he uses deception, which I love. He's like, oh, my villain, which is the weapon where the Valkyries, messengers of the guy, kind of essentially confused with the person to become a weapon. So he's like, oh, it's these giant scissors. No, it's this little pouch. The reality was, it was the glove. Anything he touched with the gloves became his weapon, and he continually uses this deception to not only thwart Hercules, but to physically kill and attack him. The name of his Valkyrie helped him was Hulk. Didn't really like the way they bonded because he essentially more forced her. I didn't like that, but you could understand considering he was a villain. So to me, he's a villain who was fighting for humanity, and then you have Hercules, who is a hero fighting against humanity. So it was interesting to kind of see the moral ideologies at play here. I like that the author did that. I like throughout the battle, Hercules was not happy that he was fighting essentially alone, but he eventually comes to recognize Jack the Ripper as a adversary who is worthy of respect, and Jack the Ripper does the same to Hercules. And in the end, Jack the Ripper does beat Hercules, which was hard as a reader, but it was nice to see throughout the story. You had the fans and the humans and the gods, and then even the upper echelon of upper gods kind of comparing how, going back and forth, well, should we be rooting for Jack, should we for Hercules? And so it was interesting to me to see this. And then even Brunhilde, the main Valkyrie, was in kind of charge of setting up the humans to fight the gods, was a little conflicted, and I liked seeing that confliction of emotions. Jack the Ripper does end up winning, and Hercules does die at the end. He embraces Jack the Ripper. He probably could have killed him, but he chose to embrace him and give the win to the humans, which gave them their second win. The next battle was Raiden Kamyun, a sumo wrestler, versus Shiva. Shiva, essentially, we often think of the god of destruction, which was and so I like that they both had their stories. So Raiden essentially was a person whose muscles were continually crushing his bones. We don't know if this is true or not, but the fact that he was considered one of Japan's greatest sumo wrestlers. And then you have Shiva, the god of destruction, who they showed him kind of his story was he had his brother or his friend, Sundra, the god of the storms, who there was a Sundra. According to the language, I don't think that were that close. So to me, it was the fact that the author is using his perspective and adding it within the mythologies. And so you have Shiva and Sundra. The story was they were climbing the mountain to essentially fight the Indian gods to be the best of the best. In the end, Shiva has to fight Sundra and even beats him and becomes top Indian god. To me, this is interesting because throughout the story, Shiva's kind of being pushed back to say, I want to fight. No. Zeus and the others keep pushing him and say no. Finally, he got his chance. And it was ironic that it was against Raiden Tamun, who, sumo wrestler, whose strength had not really been fully able to use until he melds with Prudger, who's a big Valor. And the fact that, when we first introduced to Raiden, he's shown as kind of a hound dog. So when he meets her, she's all kind of insecure, about herself. I know you might probably not happy with the big woman. He's like, no, I'm happy with who you are. And so that she truly falls in love, and they merge. It's perfect. She's able to release the restrictions of his bones and the seals on him, so he can fully use his strength. And while it's an epic fist fight battle, and even Shiva would then finally pull out some fire and go into toe-to-toe. Even he loses, 3 of his arms, so if Shiva's got a 6 arms, really, one of them crushed, 2 others destroyed by this other attack of Raiden. And finally, Shiva wins. And he's able to win because he has the humans are rooting for Raiden, and you have the Indian gods are rooting for Shiva. It was Sundra who came and supported him, and I think allowed him to push through. So to me, it was nice to see that contradiction of it wasn't good versus evil. It was just 2 guys having a good fight, both wanting to be a top verse, having their own beliefs and their own people backing them up. And so I like that we're seeing that it's not sort of about good versus evil. It's more just a good fight, a good brawl. The last fight for this video I will talk about was the Buddha versus the 7 gods of misfortune. This was a very interesting fight because there was a lot of interference from Beelzebub. Kind of another god of misfortune, chaos. So Buddha ends up fighting originally. The first 7 gods of misfortune was actually Zerofuku, who takes on the misfortune of others. And he's frustrated and concerned that he's taking all this pain from people, but they're not happy. They're not doing anything about it. So then he is so frustrated when he's about to act on that and kill people. That's when the other 7 gods come out. And they're like the police of the gods. And so while they still experience Zero's misfortune and frustration, they carry out justice rather vengeance. And so to me, it was nice to see that. And Zero has a weapon that essentially the more misfortune he gets, the bigger he gets. And so every time Buddha's walking his attack, he can see it as misfortune. And so it grows bigger and bigger until it's literally 7, 8, 9, 10 just little blades coming down. And Buddha has his 6 palms, which transforms into 6 different versions, weapons to block essentially these attacks. And throughout this battle is more a battle of ideologies where Buddha's like, I don't care if you're happy or not, just come with me. It's okay. I know this is what you want. Whereas Zero's all about taking on the pain of others, and Buddha's just like living life as it is. And halfway through the fight, Zero acknowledges, and he's like, okay, I admit I lost. And then at that point, Beelzebub, I never saw that, forgive me, had implanted in Zero's little, which was Hajin, the demon ruler of the 6 realms of hell, comes out. This dude nasty. And so, I mean, he straight up goes after Buddha. Buddha's weapon breaks. And then another point where Hajin takes Zero's weapon, forms it kind of in his own, and it attacks Buddha. And when really Buddha's on the shaky end, looks like he's done for, pulls out the weapon. He sees Zero because he truly cares about Zero. And he becomes one with this weapon. And then the other 7 gods are seeing these different points of this weapon, which is kind of like a staff and then had little spikes coming out of it. More like petals, kind of like, not set up more this way. And through this, he's able to beat and push back Hajin, because Buddha's able to kind of see people's people's kind of how they're feeling, their emotions. Kind of like, I feel like Jack the Ripper's, but different sense. And so for this point, Hajin really had not been feeling anything until the weapon that fused with Zero and Buddha's weapon became one. The Hajin actually feel fear. And to this point now, Buddha was actually able to see his moves and see when he's attacking. And to this point, he's finally able to defeat him. And he wins, but Zero had also died. And so, as Buddha had chosen to fight for humanity's side versus the gods, humanity won. And it was a tie. So we now had a 3v3. 3 for the gods, 3 for the humans. I will pick up with part 3 of my Record for Ragnarok series. I'm not going to do another 3 because there's not that many chapters out. I will go up into the current chapter, and then I will wait for the new chapter, which is a monthly, and then I will do monthly reactions, as this is something a friend has asked me to do, so I will do that. JallyGrean 1990, signing out.